gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Ahmedullah. He's a long-standing friend of mine, but more importantly, Ahmedullah and his colleagues in Bricklaying Circle put a lot of hard work for us to assemble today in this gathering. And Ahmedullah did his PhD on the relationship between epistemology and political theory from Kent University, and has over the years presented a lot of papers and gave a lot of lectures in this part of his stand, and many of us are quite familiar with his thinking. But today he's going to talk on the context and decisive impact of Mir Jafar's betrayal.
Thank you very much. I will Thank you very much. Just say something else first. I'm the secretary of Whitechapel Circle, and when we decided to, actually we were thinking about doing something to remember and try to understand Plassey and what happened to Plassey, and sort of try to explain and understand our situation today. You know, the conflict we have in our country, our economic data, and the Hindu-Muslim problem, and so on. So we at this anniversary came, and somebody suggested, I don't know who suggested it was going to be the anniversary, someone did, and then we decided to do something. Murad over there from London Assembly member, he organized last week an event which was very well attended on the same topic. And we are planning to do a range of other things until next March to continue the process of encouraging people to think and learn about this. 6 months ago, I knew nothing about resolution, except what I heard from parents and heard songs and so on. I don't know how much I know now, but I will share with you what I have learned. And this is a learning process for me. So I hope I will make some interesting contribution. What I'd like to ask first is, how many people here have heard of Mir Jafar?
Everyone. Doesn't sing everyone.
Is there anybody who hasn't heard of Mir Jafar? No?
Mir Jafar family लगा होगा। बांग्लादेश से Bengal Mir Jafar नाम रखे ना।
He said in Bengal, no parents give their children the name Mir Jafar. I wonder why. Does anybody know why?
Well, it's become a swear word.
But
You are a Mir Jafar.
is there just today, should we really take that line? Or should we rebel against it?
Rethink, maybe.
Mir Jafar is a nice name. It's a nice name, so.
Anybody call me?
Okay.
People are forced down in Bangladesh. Lots of children are forced down. But nobody's calling me Jafar.
Maybe there were nicknames for the London.
It's all very well into history.
What I will do, I will just start off give you some information about the battle. This is the part of I think it's about 80 miles or so from Calcutta. On 22nd of June 1757, Clive and his forces were still on this side of the river. And for a few days they were agonizing whether to cross and confront the Nawab, JUDDHO. Some commentators, some historians say this was a really colossal gamble, because Clive had 3,000 people under him, 2,000 Indians, about 1,000 European, by 800 or so English or British. And on the other side, it is estimated that Nawab had between 60 and 70,000. Right? Clive was really agonized. At one point, Clive actually thought that no, we shouldn't cross the river. Let's wait until the rainy season is coming. The rainy season was coming. And if he was to cross the river, right, and the rain started and the whole area gets swollen with water, and if they couldn't beat Nineveh, then they would all be really massacred and killed, really. But Clive really was trying to make sure that Mir Jafar was on his side, and this agreement that they signed, the Mir Jafar was going to honor the agreement and actually play his role. But he wasn't sure, because after signing the agreement, the intelligence and the correspondence between the two, from Clive's point of view, wasn't decisive whether Mir Jafar is really going to join or not. But anyway, on 22nd night, they decided, because they had more concrete confirmation type of correspondence from Mir Jafar, that he's really going to join. They still weren't 100% sure, but they still went for it. So by about 3 o'clock at night, everybody crossed the river, and then they rested. The next morning, you see, this is called Plassey House. This is to be like Nawab Shah's hunting lodge. And so they took this over, and Nawab Shah's was somewhere over there. And they were slowly moving towards this direction. On the north side, there were about some Frenchmen fighting, and especially looking after the guns, the cannons and heavy cannons. At about 8 o'clock in the morning, so before even 8, when it started to become light, Clive went top of the house. He started to look through telescope, see, and he saw really colossal number of Nawab soldiers all over, and moving and taking their position and making a sort of circular shape. Mir Jafar was here, Ahmedullah and Latif Khan. His name is not here. So the battle, actually they say, commenced at about 8 o'clock by French gunners actually firing. And by that time, Robert Clive actually took out, because they were there, his soldiers. He brought them out here, and there was an exchange. And within a very short time, about 10 English, British, and about 20 Indian sepoys were killed on the British side. But then, because Clive's forces were small, he quickly changed his mind and brought them, to take cover and protect themselves. The firing continued, but no sign of Mir Jafar, Ahmedullah and Latif Khan joining in, even though a few days before he promised the Nawab that he was going to be on his side, while sending Clive a letter to come and he's ready to join him. But the British states, they didn't join, but they were not sure whether he would join in. So they actually kept some of their guns facing towards Mir Jafar and his group, just in case they attack. The judgment, the view of most historians that I've read, said that had Mir Jafar joined and Ahmedullah and Latif Khan, then the British would have lost very badly. The question that I want to ask at this stage is, like this brother was saying, that if Mir Jafar did not betray, then they would have conquered maybe another time. I mean, how do you know? JUDDHO, the first Indian ruler, after the first English-Mughal war in 1688, around that time, who defeated an English force in Calcutta. In the south, none of the Indian armies managed to defeat any European army.
Tipu Sultan.
Yeah. So we really can't tell. Had Shahidullah actually defeated and killed Clive and his forces, then he would have killed a great soldier, Sardar, that they described as Clive. His reputation was so high, right? He caused a spectacular victory for the British in South India, right? And his sort of single-mindedness and his methods and the way he used to inspire people, his soldiers, and the lightning night strike that he used to make, and he used to get his people to march in the rain and so on, inspire them and so on. He became such a respectable sort of general, and as a sort of non-professional soldier, because his background is not a professional soldiery class. By his victories and his method, he actually became very popular, and I'm sure his victories in South India actually was known within Bengal. When he came to Bengal, he was actually in Bengal already in around 1750 for a period of rest, and then he really got himself familiar with the wealth and riches of Bengal. But in about 1751, I think, he scored the major victory in Arcot against the French and the local ruler. It was like it was impossible. Such a large force, and he defeated with a very small force. But he went back to England, and he tried. He made a lot of money in South India, but then he ran out of his money, spending too much and trying to buy parliamentary seat and things like that. So he had no other choice. He came back, but he was going to become the deputy governor of St. Fort George, But when he arrived back to Madras, the news of the fall of Calcutta arrived. So they decided to send a large force under Robert Clive. Even though Clive wasn't from the army, but because of his reputation, they gave him full control, commander-in-chief in charge to recapture, and gave him instruction, to try and get somebody within the Nawab camp to buy them off, to win their because of the recession and so on. So he came in December 1756 to Bengal, and within the very few days he took Falta. Sorry, they were in Falta. He took Bajbat, then he took Thanapur, then he took Calcutta. Right? In Calcutta there was no fight, no force didn't even fight. Because not year before, it was 7 or 8 months before, 6-7 months before, the Black Hole of Calcutta occurred in July, around July 20, when Nawaz actually defeated the English defenders of Fort William, and then he established, he left Mani Chand in charge. He quickly went back to his capital. He thought the English were looting, and they wouldn't be able to come back and organize themselves. So they suffered such a big defeat. But they did come under Robert Clive. And the speed in which he took over Calcutta, and he didn't stop in Calcutta. Originally Calcutta was their base, Fort William, and he didn't stop. But they wanted to strike terror at the heart of the people in Bengal and the Nawab. So they decided to go and destroy the city of Hooghly. Right? Very soon after Calcutta was recaptured. But anyway, so what happened? They said that during the battle, around sometime in the afternoon, heavy rain started to pour into the battlefield. Now the British took protection to cover and protect their ammunition and gunpowder and so on, while the French didn't, or the Bengal army didn't. So it really puzzles me. I mean, they know it rains. Why they actually take precautions to cover up? But this always comes from the history that's written by the British, right? Or their supporters afterwards. But I find it really, really hard to believe, right, that the British should protect there, but the French wouldn't. And the French were, in terms of techniques and skills and training, they were no inferior to the British. Right? But anyway, so this is how the story has been told. But in the afternoon, Mir Modon suddenly gets shot by a cannon and he dies. Right? Mohan Lal, who's also Mir Modon and Mohan Lal, they were the loyal soldiers of royal commanders, were fighting on North side. So Mir Modon, he died. And there's another important commander who died as well. I forgot his name. But Mohan Lal kept on fighting. But Mir Jafar is now joining, right? And so JUDDHO started to get worried with loss of two important commanders. Mohanlal was still very brave, fighting against the British. And they were not losing, even though their ammunition, their guns, their gunpowder got damaged. But this did not give the British any decisive victory, right? British were actually thinking that they want to maintain their position until night. Then Clive is going to use his old method of striking late at night in the enemy's camp, lightning strike, which he did several times in the south. This was how they were planning to maintain their position, not lose. But JUDDHO summoned Mir Jafar. So what's going on? And Mir Jafar said, look, it's already getting a bit late, right? Let's rest and then I join you tomorrow, right? But secretly he sent letters telling Clive to attack, but apparently the letter didn't get to Clive, right? But JUDDHO didn't trust him first, because a few days before, JUDDHO discovered his treacherous plan, but he sort of forgave him because he needed him, and he pleaded that he's going to be on his side. But anyway, so what happened is that JUDDHO summoned him, and he said, look, let's rest, I'll join you tomorrow, and get your forces to retreat so they can have a rest too. But then JUDDHO summoned Raidullah, right, for his view that he's coming. And Raidullah gave the same view. So I was thinking, although they were separately engaged with the British, right, they must have been in collusion or cooperating in the conspiracy. But I don't have much knowledge of it. Raidullah gave the same suggestion that they retreat and tomorrow they will fight after a good rest, right? So Shiraz ordered Mohanlal to retreat, but Mohanlal said, "This is crazy because we are fighting, in the middle of, I'm not going to retreat." But Shiraz actually forced him to retreat. When Clive saw that Mohanlal and the Bengal army is retreating, his clothes were all wet, so he decided to go there and change his clothes. And at that time, against his instruction, Major Kilpatrick, he decided to attack retreating army. And when Robert saw that, he thought this is crazy, and he went and nearly got Kilpatrick arrested. But then they thought, since we already moved, it's no good, they were going to retreat, right? But then they carried on, and then the North forces under Mohanlal were moving. And at that time, news went to Shiraz that the British are moving and towards his camp. Then Shiraz apparently, going to a camel and with a lot of his people just made a run. And when he made a run, total disarray, and then the British went for the kill. Now, in terms of description about exactly how many died and what happened, I haven't read much, but the aftermath information says that about 500 of Nova forces were there, and over a long period, because when the Muslim or the Bengal army used to move, they didn't used to only move with armed forces. They used to move with a whole range of other, support, from coups, all sorts of, things. So over a long period, they were strewn with, big, bags and other items that they brought, that they made a big run. And that was it. By about 5:30 or 6, it was all over, right? But then, Mir Jafar, he didn't know what was coming, right? He didn't know what was coming. And whether Clive probably, although he had big ambition, what he wanted to do. But some of these things are like cause and effect, right? You cannot. It's not like a master plan that you execute, right? How things unfolded, it seems to me that it's like cause and effect. Seeing the weakness of one person, then making a move, then making another move, and like that. Now, why did Mir Jafar actually betray Nawab? JUDDHO. We say that Mir Jafar, because he became a dirty name, we think he's really evil, he's found out, and because of him, we were enslaved by the British for about 200 years. I just want to go back for a few minutes to talk about the context, the climate, and some of the things that were happening. Those of you know that Murshid Quli Khan, number one, Murshid Quli Khan, they say he was the first independent Nawab of Bengal. He was first sent by Aurangzeb to Bengal to be the Diwan, not the Nazim, not the political ruler, but the head. And he came and he started to bring very, very important changes to the economic structure of society. He started to move the old zamindars from Bengal, took their land and send them, give them rights to land in Orissa. And he reorganized land ownership in Bengal. And he became very efficient in this. And in the process, a new whole class was created. But as the Mughal power became weaker and weaker, he asserted himself more and became nearly independent. Although theoretically, Bengal is still part of Mughal Empire, but their control over Bengal loosened every day. Right? Murshid Quli Khan, he lived until about 1727. And before he died, he nominated his grandson should be the new ruler of Bengal. And his name was Sarfraz Khan. Sarfraz Khan's father objected to that. And Sarfraz Khan's father, Sarfraz Khan's mother, who was Murshid Quli Khan's daughter, she lived with him and Sarfraz Khan. But the father, Shujauddin, he lived somewhere else. There's some family problem. Rather than, so what happened? Immediately after Murshid Quli Khan's death, Sarfraz Khan couldn't become the ruler because his father came and established himself as the ruler. And he ruled quite efficiently until about 1739. And he brought in a lot of people from South India into Bengal. And one of the person he brought in was Oliver D. Khan. And he was Shirazuddaullah's grandfather. So, but before Shujauddin died, he actually nominated his son to be the ruler, Sarfraz Khan. So he did become the ruler just for over a year, just like Shirazuddaulah. But it was Oliver D. Khan who actually conspired and killed him in 1739 or 1740. And then he became the ruler. Right? Just like Murshid Quli Khan, Oliver D. Khan also nominated his grandson because he didn't have any son. He only had 3 daughters. Right? Murshid Quli Khan didn't have any son, he had daughters, so he would nominate his son-in-law. He nominated his grandson to be the ruler. So what we had during that time, there were lots of infighting and lots of treachery and people breaking promises and also you had invasion from Persia, Nadir Shah, who really destroyed Delhi in 1739 around that time. And later on Ahmad Shah of Delhi from Afghanistan, and he was also coming to Bengal. Right? So my point is that and also Mir Jafar, he wasn't, the reason he really couldn't consolidate his power, I think, because his character, he wasn't a good leader, as far as I can see. He fought bravely, he supported Oliver D. Khan in various campaigns, but he also tried to betray him a few other times, right? But in terms of being like a natural leader, the Oliver D. Khan was, Mir Jafar wasn't, it seems to be. But what I want to say is that you are right in a way that if Mir Jafar didn't betray, maybe the British would have conquered us anyway. Because I give you an example. Clive, after sack of Hooghly, he decided to attack Chandanagar, which was the base of the French in Bengal, the main base. Another place too. But then the Shirazuddaulah, he wouldn't accept that, right? And actually, I made a slight mistake. It was not after sack of Hooghly. It was after the Treaty of Alinagar when Shirazuddaulah try to retake Calcutta after Clive, took over Calcutta. But anyway, so Clive decided to attack the French. But JUDDHO wanted the French and the British to be neutral in the territory. And JUDDHO just concluded a treaty with Clive, the British. Right? And JUDDHO accepted all their privileges, got their fort back. They were allowed to have, this tax-free trade, and they were allowed to mint coins, which they didn't, British never got permission before. It's only in the Treaty of Wellington in February 1757 that Clive, the British got rights to actually mint coin. So what the Nawab JUDDHO, he instructed Non-Kumar, his folder in Hooghly, to actually come to the side of the French if the British attacked, or come to the side of the British if the French attacked. Because the French and the British were actually fighting against each other for the supremacy. It all started in 1740 with the British jealous of the French, increase in French trade and influence, and then they decided to attack the French in India. Right? So, but the British were determined to attack the French and get the French out of Bengal. Right? But Non-Kumar, he was instructed by JUDDHO to allow that. But the British bought Non-Kumar, gave him some money, and he was. So, British were actually going around, using their contacts to create dissension and buy important people to be on their side, and they were able to do that. Right? Why they were able to do that? There could be a variety of reasons. One is that when they were developing trade for over 100 years, it was profitable for both merchants in Bengal and the rulers, because they were getting a lot of economic output as a result. And also the British were benefiting, and Bengal was prospering. I just want to point out one thing: Bengal's trade was so big, but the majority of the trade were with Asia, not Europe. European trade amounted to about 1/3. 2/3 was with Asia. It was important, significant, but not the main source. So what I want to say is that so over the years, relationship developed, and a lot of people actually were suffering because of the destruction of the English in Calcutta when they rooted from Fort William. That's one thing. The other thing is that within the Nawab family and camp, there were already too much deception. And when Robert Clive, because of his reputation of him being such a like a ruthless and excellent fighter, or whatever they call him, it is his reputation to win in battle, to strike terror in the heart of his enemy, right? So people actually expected Clive to win, and when he came back to Calcutta, and the decisive action that he took from Falta to Bajba to Calcutta and then destroyed Hooghly, and then later on Chandanagar, the French fought bravely but they couldn't resist him. So his reputation became so big, so important, people thought it was him who could actually defeat JUDDHO. But you see, some people say that JUDDHO invited the British to come and help him. But really, earlier JUDDHO did try to get JUDDHO's cousin, Shaukat Chand, from Bihar, to actually rival JUDDHO and try to found the sword. And he actually also got permission from Mughals to be the Nawab of Bengal, Shaukat Chand, JUDDHO's cousin. But that didn't succeed because JUDDHO moved quickly against him and neutralized him and killed him. Right? And immediately after JUDDHO came to power, his auntie was transferred against him, Kasti Begum, and Mir Jafar were involved, and he took decisive action. So within, there were lots of people, because there were many, ambitious people who wanted to know of themselves, but then there were, people supporting other people, seeing which way they're moving and who might be able to give them more money and more to distribute some. So as far as my understanding goes, is that Clive and the British were able to achieve and buy up people and create dissension because of the victory that they were achieving and the reputation of Clive. Because before Clive came, Roger Grey, isn't he? He was the governor of Fort William Council. He couldn't do half of what Robert did. He tried to threaten JUDDHO, he tried to create dissension, but JUDDHO actually came and defeated him and got him out of the place. So what I would say, the Mir Jafar's betrayal was decisive, because without that, probably the British would have lost. But if Mir Jafar did not give British real strong assurance on their side, then the British probably wouldn't have crossed the river. They might have encamped and developed another conspiracy, right? But if JUDDHO won, if Mir Jafar betrayed Robert, not JUDDHO, then it's possible that JUDDHO's reputation would have been the highest in India, because Clive was the man, you know, the fight that everybody feared, right? And if a Bengal ruler, young, if he defeated Clive on the battle and killed him, then it's possible that JUDDHO might have become a mighty ruler, and he was very young, right? Anyway, so that's my contribution today, and
Thank you. Again, we have about 10 minutes to, or less than 10 minutes to sort of take maybe a cluster of 3 questions. We start with 1, 2, 3.
Can I just say, my memory is so bad. One question at a time, please.
Okay, then quick. Please, quick questions. And okay, you start first, please.
It's not so much of a question. It's actually, you mentioned about this endemic conspiracy and tragedy in the whole Nawab family and probably Muslim family, Muslim rulers as such, you see. But what happened is, I read from Mohar Ali's history of the Muslims of Bengal. He mentioned that the night before the battle, or a couple of nights before, Sirajuddaula suspected treachery. So he called in all these commanders and made them swear by the Quran, Mir Jafar and the other Sikhs and others. And Mir Jafar did swear by the Quran that he will not fight with the British and he will not attack Nawab's forces, and JUDDHO was happy with that. But what actually happened, he went neutral. He actually fulfilled all his promise and the square words he did by the Quran. And that's what he did, interesting on the roof.
I'm not sure if this is true. What I have read, that he didn't swear on the Quran, but it was covered by something else, you know. But JUDDHO thought it was the Quran, right? Yeah? That's treachery. What's the but about being neutral, he wasn't neutral, right? He didn't actually fight, you know. But he actually, gave JUDDHO wrong advice, and at the same time sending letters to Clive better, right? Apparently, his letter didn't get to Robert Clive. So he wasn't neutral, he was playing a different role. Some people say that he was really typical Indian ruler, just waiting to see, or Indian military commander or something, going to see which side was winning before joining in.
Yeah, that's
Indian. Yeah. He was not Indian. But Mir Jafar was an Uzbek. He used to, in his childhood days, he used to drive mules. And then he came over to India as a mercenary.
He was not a skin.
He was originally from Uzbekistan.
With few generations.
No, he was first generation Uzbek who came from Uzbek. He was born in Uzbekistan.
Actually,
And
I've read that he's from Najib, but anyway.
Please.
Yeah, Ahmedullah, thank you for this fascinating account of the battle. Enjoyed it, thank you very much. What I want to ask you is, how did Clive establish his contract with Mir Jafar, and how did he lure him onto his side? Now, this is very topical at the moment because the outgoing ambassador to Bangladesh, American ambassador, in her leaving speech said that Bengalis are very friendly and hospitable, but they are also conspiratorial. What I'm trying to understand is it in our blood, or the West had a way of implanting conspiracy in our culture?
Actually, I haven't done enough work to know if it's in our blood or not. But what I can say, some of the English people in Bengal who were linked to East India Company. You know, some of the East India Company, they've been there for a very, very long time. They had very, very strong links and relationship, and they had many friends. And some people, like say William Watts. William Watts?
Yes, it is.
William Watts. Now he knew the language, right? He was based in Hasimbagh, the English factory not far from Mushirabad, and he knew everything. He read the account, right? He was so well informed, right? But it was him and there were a few other people, and then major Indian people were Umichan, Jagat Seth, and others. Through them, they tried to identify who could be the main in the people in Srihadullah's camp. Could be Lur. The first name wasn't Mir Jafar. First name was Mir Latif Khan. His name is not here, but he was situated there, right? And Mir Latif Khan actually is supposed to have volunteered. You know that he don't mind being the Nawab, right? But then after and some people were actually Umichan was in favor of Mir Latif Khan, right? But then through whatever process, they decided he wasn't the right man. He didn't have the standing, within the society. And Mir Jafar came forward, and because he was the Bakshi, the Paymaster General of the army, actually I haven't still fully understood the command structure of the army. Because even if you look at this situation, it seems that there wasn't a single armed, chain of command here. So it seemed that Mir Jafar, they were all reporting to Srihadullahah rather than on the battlefield. So Srihadullahah really the commander-in-chief, it seems like. Yeah? Even the Mir Jafar seems to have been the most senior, among the top general. But then there was no communication between him and, in terms of ordering and chain of command. So that was very strange as well. So what I want to say is that so they had very good contacts, right? And also the British were actually buying or paying people. Whitechapel, he was bought up. I don't remember exactly for how much money. Right? And but in Mir Jafar's case, it was different. British didn't buy him off, but Mir Jafar agreed to pay a huge amount, not to the British. And I'm going to read you something quickly, right? The amount that went to the British, just immediately. This is only part, but there was a lot more that went. It says. Clive, right? He was led into the large chamber where fabulous wealth glittered all around him. King Solomon's mines could not have been more resplendent. In addition to his 2 lakhs under the treaty, right? Clive was given a personal gift by the Nawab of 16 lakhs, right? Altogether, he took 230,000, right? And today's value is about 2 million or something.
200 million.
20 million, say about 20 million. Today's value about 20 million. At today's value, a colossal fortune worthy of an English duke. It was true he could have taken more, and that he turned down the gifts of Hindu nobility. But by any standard, his victory had made him fabulously wealthy. Within a couple of days, the first payment to the British was loaded. The first payment was only about 1/3, if I remember correctly. Right, loaded onto 75 boats, each carrying a lot, around 15,000. This procession, bearing around 1 million altogether, perhaps the largest shipment of booty in history, set off in a large and colorful regatta of music, drums, and flags, and joined at Hooghly by an impressive British naval escort. To those who watched, it must have seemed that the very wealth of Bengal was being taken down river. That was only a third of that, and there were so many others. You see, it says that East India Company made about over 300 or around 300 or something million today's value from the Battle of Plassey. And Clive himself made more than 20.
There was a second. Yes, please. Thank you for the presentation. It's amazing how little we learn from history. Divide and rule and learning still exists. But my question would be is that what was the trade-off between Clive and Mir Jafar? Did Mir Jafar get anything in return for his betrayal? And what was his fate? What happened after the battle?
Well, Mir Jafar, he was going to become the Nawab. Right? That was the trade, that was the treaty. That English was going to help him to become the Nawab. And Mir Jafar did become the Nawab. But he soon realized how useless Nawab he was. Right? Because Robert Clive was always breathing down his, how do you say, neck.
Almost true.
And he realized he doesn't have any independence. Right? And what Robert Clive was doing soon afterwards is, there were like little rebellions against Mir Jafar. Some were loyal to Rothschild or something, want him to be, and Robert Clive would sort of invite them and give them protection and stop Mir Jafar from going and killing them or putting the rebellion down. So Robert Clive started to become protector of all the rebellious princes and rebellious commanders and governors, wherever in different parts. So soon it became clear that Mir Jafar didn't have any real power. He became weaker and weaker. And then he was deposed, and his son-in-law Mir Qasim was brought in to power. Really, Mir Jafar, he might have had a little period of glory, but it was a very short period of glory.
I'll take one more question. Murad.
Thank you, Murad. I just wanted to touch on one or two things, but can I just make one comment? I do think actually there are one or two parallels with today. For example, you've just mentioned the plundering by the East Indian Company. I think it's no different to the plundering we've just beginning to hear about amongst the political and business classes in Bangladesh. I mean, if you convert on the money, it's equivalent. I mean, when you say lakhs, it's the equivalent of tens and hundreds even of lakhs. It's equivalent amounts now in Bangladesh when they're talking about all the corruption cases. And oddly enough, a lot of it is ended up here in London, in Poppy City and things like this. So in some ways there are some parallels. But the thing I wanted to go back to, given we're talking about the history of the battle, also in economics, to what extent did this set the pattern for the next 100 years? Because, I mean, effectively, the East India Company was trying to do two things. Trying to get monopoly markets and expand its markets in South Asia as much as possible. And it had the oddity of having a private army as well, because most of the armies at the time were mercenary. You could buy and sell them quite easily, so this isn't surprising, honestly, that you could buy people off. And to what extent did this set the pattern for other encroachments in the rest of the subcontinent? I'm thinking of General Napier in the Sindh. I mean, as far as I know, they were all funded by the East India Company. And I wondered whether the tactics involved in this kind of battle with Clive and other elements show the blueprint of what was actually happening before actually the British government got involved. Because actually, whilst all this was happening, there was actually a very, very important discourse happening here in London, which I think Nick Robbins will touch on, but people like Adam Smith were completely appalled by what was being done in their names. Odd enough, we have people like Karl Marx saying this is not a bad thing, but that's Karl Marx's view. But I would like to see if there are some discerning patterns from this particular battle, which actually meant you could that could show actually what was the common strategy of the East India Company for the next 100 years.
To be honest with you, I haven't gone that far, but I have just the impression that I get about how the British expanded and the tactics that they use. There seems to be just to say something about looting. We recently became aware of massive corruption that some political leaders in Bangladesh are undertaking, and it is quite shocking as well. So there is a parallel in that sense, but I don't want to go into this in another way. But what I want to say is that for me, I think what happened is that when the French started to interfere in local politics in South India in the 1730s and 40s, what they realized is that although the Indians have really large armies, they were different kind of army. The kind of training, the discipline, the equipment that they used, they were becoming obsolete compared to the advancement that the West was making. I'll give you one example. the English East India Company, they declared war against the Mughals in about 1687, 88, around that time. And the Mughals defeated them decisively. And the English they just didn't have a chance. And I read somewhere that the guns, what they used, the English guns could fire one round every 4 minutes. Right? So, and they have to wait, prepare and take 4 minutes to fire another. But by around 1740s, the French, when they were fighting, I think the army of Anwar al-Saudi, in the Carnatic, not far from Madras, the French cannons could fire 12 every minute. And look at the advance that they've made, in the last 50 years, for the scientific and other discoveries. But also they were, going all over the world and trying to build empire, doing trade and fighting. So their training and their equipment they were developing, right? But I'm not sure how much development was taking place within India and the Mughals. I'm sure there would have been some improvement, some changes, but the Europeans were developing much faster, becoming more of a force. So what I think they realized, starting from the French defeat of big colossal army of Anwar in South India, is that Indian army, they can't fight. Few well-trained European soldiers with their method of fighting, they could defeat big army. Of course, they try to create tension. They try to protect one to against the other. They try to interfere. So I think the realization that you can build big army and powerful Indian army, that was one that guided them because they knew the insight. And if you read some of their accounts, they will actually tell you, what they found the weaknesses to be and how small force they can be big. But in terms of your broader question, I really don't know because I haven't done enough work.
Thank you, Ahmedullah, for your